In this video, KDE dropped X11, a bird, and a rat. As a user of Openmandriva that ships by default with KDE, it's sad to hear that KDE will be dropping support for its X11 session. This feels like one of the biggest anime betrayals of 2025. KDE is known to be a desktop environment that allows customization beyond what a typical person would ever need without ever touching config files. Dropping the X11 session feels like abandoning that spirit, especially compared to GNOME's more opinionated curation. For most users, this wouldn't be a problem as Wayland, KDE's new love interest 18+, has matured to an extent that it should, with big asterisks, be usable for most singular daily tasks and processes without much hiccups. However, old-timers may find their old tools and tried-tested methods not compatible with KDE moving forward, starting with Plasma version 6.8. At the time of writing, we're at 6.6. According to ancient rules, many of our established tools are not Wayland compatible either, like TigerVNC for multi-user remote desktop, KeyNav and XMouseless for mouse navigation using the keyboard, SimpliScreen Recorder for lightweight desktop recording, and XSetWacom to manage and configure drawing tablets. Other users report that similar tools are available for Wayland, which is good. However, there's the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Can't justify the energy and time for the new hotness when the old and busted work, and work well with little to no friction. Anyway, for a layman's knowledge and entertainment, this does give us a really good excuse to see what else Openmandriva offers when it comes to desktops. In case like us, using X11 sessions are preferred, or in some Forge Planet mandatory, for tools, processes, and general usage. For recording's convenience, we'll be firing up the Openmandriva virtual machine setup we had last video. Now, the Openmandriva greeter does provide a point-and-click method for installing desktops. Just fire it up, go to the Configure tab, then the Desktop tab. From there, LXQT Desktop is what we'll try first. Just enter your long and complicated password, and it should be ready soon enough. Let's do some reboot magic and fast forward back to the login screen. In case you don't know, on most GNU/Linux systems, login managers would usually have an option where you can choose which desktop environment you will be logging into after entering your password. Just make sure you do this step so you won't be lost in KDE again. First startup will generally take a few seconds, but as far as we know, LXQT is still pretty snappy compared to something like GNOME or KDE. This is, of course, purely for the desktop environment, not including all the other startup variables. Not like our VM or the host machine has any speed to boast about. There's our panel. Funny that it's crying about battery. We remember that this has been one of the first things that we also saw when we first tried LXQT via Lubuntu back in 18.04. Before we do anything else, let's get the resolution corrected. It's not in the desktop menu apparently. Let's try the menu search. Nope, guess we have to manually look it up in the start menu. Probably would have been faster, we just used xrandr. Monitor, we were expecting keywords more like display. Let's get it matched up to our 768p monitor and move on. Apply, save, close. Reminds us of Apply OK combo back in XP. Moving on, this is what LXQT generally looks like in Openmandriva. Top left, we still have the desktop icons for the Openmandriva greeter and other resources. Desktop icons may not always be aesthetically pleasing, but are used well and sparingly in this case. The panel, looking very standard, in our opinion, is also very good. Just one long bar with the things that you need, like a time and date, a system tray, some pinned tools, and the main menu. We'd argue that the Show Desktop button isn't really a necessity, but mouse friends might have actual use for it, unlike keyboard chads. For the system tray, daemons for notification and removable media are included by default. Removable media daemon is actually really good for helping the user mount drives, as they are plugged in and detected in /dev. Imagine the alternative of doing sudo mount and chown or chmod every time you mount. Nope. Pain in the arse that is. Meanwhile, we've never really found any good use case to justify notifications, so we don't think this is a necessity. And that's on both phones and computers, mind you. Openmandriva also has the 2x2 virtual desktop layout in their LXQT defaults. In GNOME, that's a desktop on demand toward the right, not enabled by default on KDE, and is a 4x1 layout in something like OpenBox, bit different than most others. And remember, kids, use your virtual desktops to limit your window switching to 2, 3 max. Stop wasting your time by alt-tabbing more than twice. Anyway, you will also see some of the preset pinned programs on the bottom left here consisting of the start icon, the Openmandriva logo, by the way, the Falcon browser, a KDE-maintained browser, LXQT configuration. We'll check that in a bit. PCManFMQUT. We'd say PCManFMGTK2 is superior, but whatever, and the LXQT terminal. So here is the LXQT menu. A real simple bar with categories to group the programs into chunks that will not overwhelm the user. Then, of course, the logout or shutdown menu. The Windows XP era of start menus really got it right. Just got to keep it simple, kids. It also has this search box here, but it cannot search for files, just the entries that are in this menu as far as we can tell, which is fine. Let's quickly check the Falcon browser. YouTube works. Ad blocker isn't as good apparently. Let's try Reddit. It works. The better Reddit works. It seems like they're getting there, but not really. Not at least until they have an equivalent to uBlock Origin. LXQT also has its own settings menu. Here is where you can find things you may want to change, like the resolution, the background, icon packs, themes even, and so on. Each option opens its own window, keeping each nicely segregated, making each window less visually cluttered. Moving on to PCManFMQUT. Used it for a couple of months back in Ubuntu 18.04. Didn't like it, but maybe it was because we were expecting it to be a carbon copy of the good old PCManFM, but it's functional enough in its own right. Compared to what we consider bloaty like Dolphin by KDE or Nautilus by GNOME. Not a fan of its single-click default though. Literally why? Nayo. Niamirayo. Onigai shimasu. Finally, LXQT also ships its own terminal with its namesake. The LXQT terminal looks fine, and it seems to have more function than what we would personally want, but it's present and correct for an average user's convenience. All in all, we would say that LXQT looks comfy enough. It feels smooth on a 2 GB VM with 2 cores. At a glance, it looks like it has the potential to be Openmandriva's next flagship desktop, to continue supporting the X11 platform. But who knows? Besides LXQT, the next desktop environment that we think is a good option to replace KDE with is the GTK-based XFCE. Now, let's quickly jump onto another VM and check out XFCE served via Openmandriva. In order to install this one in Openmandriva, by the way, you're in Rock, right? We have never been a fan of rolling release distros. So, yes, no Rome for us. Unlike LXQT, which is fairly brainless to install, XFCE requires a little bit more fiddling to set up. Like earlier, we'll use the Openmandriva greeter. But this time, we'll click on Repositories. Down, you'll see a plus icon to add repos. This is because, on a typical Rock install, XFCE is actually not available for some reason. So, we do recommend it that even if you're not going to use XFCE, enable these repos just in case you'll be needing something a bit more obscure than normal. This is also where you can switch your install from Rock, the stable release version, to Rome, the rolling release version. We'd recommend an average Joe to stick with Rock because it needs less maintenance, but if you really need the bleeding edge, go ahead and switch to Rome here. Anyway, click on OK. It will ask for your password to set it up. Make sure to use the Openmandriva greeter to update your setup before continuing. In our case, we have done this prior, so no need this time. Now, we'll close that and open up a terminal. Yes, the terrifyingly terrible terminal. There you go. Now we have to search for XFCE. So, remember we use DNF in this distro, so a quick sudo DNF search XFCE should do. Can't even type the long and complicated password. We know that the giant wall of text is scary, but just scroll a bit, and you will see our target, task XFCE no arch. We can copy and paste that with the sudo DNF install command and let it install XFCE from there. 300-ish megabytes. Doesn't look too bad. We're sure this would actually be bigger compared to standalone installs for KDE or GNOME. Once completed, we'll do the magical sudo reboot now and fast forward into XFCE. Here we are in a freshly installed XFCE session. Off the bat, it doesn't even look that bad. We remember that by default, XFCE actually ships with grays and beiges for its color scheme, but having it black like this isn't bad at all. The desktop icons are quite crowded here already, in our opinion. Home is just the file manager. The file system, a bit questionable, because is there any use case to have that in there? Most users shouldn't even have permissions needed to fiddle with things in this directory. The trash is also accessible in the file manager, by the way. Up top, you'll see the XFCE panel. Just like what we said in LXQT, it's good to have it simple. And this one is even more bare bones. The username on the top right actually contains your session logout and friends dialog. But personally, we take that off since it's also available in other places, as you'll see later. Date and time is present and correct. We do love that they also track weeks here, since we use ISO standards for certain things, and that includes week tracking. Now for the desktops. You'll see that, like what we said earlier, XFCE is one to ship a 4x1 layout. We don't know if you can do 2x2 here, but it's just a matter of getting used to. And the final part of that panel is the main menu. Same with LXQT. It's simple. It's a bit overwhelming on the settings. We don't know why that is, but the other sections look fairly empty. And on the lowest part is the logout, which also has the shutdown and logout dialogues. In contrast to LXQT, XFCE by default doesn't use pin programs. Instead, it has this dock here that is used to launch commonly used items. From the left, you have the show desktop, again for the mouse friends, followed by the XFCE terminal, fairly standard for a GUI terminal. Next up is the XFCE file manager, also known as Thunar. Let's move it to another workspace. We like Thunar as it's actually like PCman FM. You can use it all over the place without installing the entirety of XFCE. And it behaves pretty much like the old PCman FM as well. For example, if you open it like this and press the arrow buttons, it immediately highlights and moves around the icons. And more importantly, it doesn't spill to the Places tab or the address and whatnot, and is consistent even when doing a file pick or file save dialog. Not all GUI file managers are this consistent when it comes to keyboard-centric movement. You can also search the current folder as soon as you start pressing letters, as you can see on the bottom right corner, without changing the current layout of the things. We don't know if that's good or not, but for us, it's what we expect a file manager to do to help movement without mouse more efficiently anyway. Let's move to another virtual desktop and see what is their default browser, which apparently isn't set up yet. Kinda not expecting that since it's only Chromium that's here. No need to discuss Chromium though, it's great, but we recommend you use Zen or something. The application finder is also something that never really made much sense for us. But we do understand that some people cannot navigate or get overwhelmed by some menus, so we guess it has a use case. Then, on the last part is just something that we never knew how to use either. XFCE Bros. Seriously, what's this? Why does this exist? Going back to the settings menu, that is indeed terrifying to look at. However, XFCE, in our opinion, competes with KDE as one of the most configurable desktop environments without ever needing to dive into config files. So, a lot of things can be changed and configured here. It is also known in GNU/Linux circles that XFCE is a project that really takes its time when it comes to updates. So for the foreseeable future, XFCE 4 will be here for quite a while. Ultimately, this are all just speculation. We currently have no idea what Openmandriva is planning to do since they are historically tied to KDE, but also seems committed to continue supporting X sessions, as they have first-party support for XLibri, the spiritual drop-in backwards compatible successor to X11. For end users like us, including the layman and the normies, none of these really matter. The only question that needs to be answered is, does my program work or no? And the answer for us is obvious. The push for Wayland is a direct threat to our workflows and tools. Hopefully, Openmandriva can provide facilities for X11 friends to continue being old and busted while using the new hotness. And on that terrible note, it's time to end the show. Good night.